Presenting today will be Tonya Bednarick. She is one of our senior developers. She actually developed and built our aggregate gradations testing page, and she will be explaining how it works and everything, and will help answer questions at the end that come in to the chat window on our webinar. I will ask her, and I will monitor the chat window and ask Tonya at the end of her presentation any questions that we have to ask. So our agenda today will be talking about how to set it up, showing the page, showing how it gets set up, how you set up sieves, input aggregates, input specs, how you run the tests, and how you do reporting out of the pages. With that said, I'd love to introduce you to Tonya. She will be taking over the screen and sharing her system with the actual pages so that we can watch as she describes. So how's it going, Tonya? Thank you. And we're all excited.
Thanks, Brent. Happy to be here. Let me get my screen shared. Right. The gradations feature has to start out with some setup in order to have aggregates that you want to collect data on. So the setup would be under configuration, gradation setup, and we start with the aggregate sizes. Each size gets a grade, and you can, like many places in the system, you can add an order by, and you can also make something inactive if you no longer need it. The sizes, it's just a description, whatever's relevant to you. These sizes I got from a specification for gradations, and we've got the choice of coarse or fine, and again, active and order by. After you get your sizes set up, then you would create your sieve sizes, and you can set up your sieves so that they're plant specific, and you put them in with a description, and if you want it to default on, which means it would show up as something available in your test. You can deactivate a sieve if you no longer need it, and then you would select what plant you want it to show up in, or you can have it show up in all plants, of course. So if I wanted this one to show up in both plants I have available, to do that. And so for each test, you would need several, whatever the sieves you have available, you could list all of them. And then when you're creating your specification for particular size, you can exclude sieves that wouldn't be needed for that size of aggregate. I'll get to that when we build the specification. So after you have your sieves and your sizes, then you can create your aggregates. And just like the sieves, you can say whether or not the aggregate exists at a certain plant. And you can deactivate it and put it in a specific order. And the sizes that you have already created are used here to indicate what size the aggregate is. And the size is used in the specification so that rather than having to build a specification for each aggregate, you build it for the size. And So everything that's size 7 would use the same specification. And so onto the specifications. So let's see. I've got size 6, 67, 7, probably 8, and 89 set up in here for the aggregate sizes. So everything you see on here is basically a sieve that is used for size 6. So if I could filter by the size and just show size 6 on here. Here you would select the aggregate size that you're creating the specification for, and then the sieve size. If it's excluded, that means it's not needed for the test, but you are going to keep it in the display so that you don't have to like remove it from the actual stack of sieves while you're doing your testing. And you could set, if it's excluded, when you save it, the min and max are set to 0 so that it wouldn't cause you to fail the test if something got caught in that particular sieve. And because there are so many specifications, and this is the most, basically the longest form, which it's not very long, but you have to create a lot of these specifications in order to do the full test. There's a copy option on this screen, and you can copy the sieve. I'm not going to copy this one. I'm going to go to the 8 where I still had 89. Sorry about that. Well, I guess I did build out all of 89. Anyway, when you copy, it makes an exact duplicate on the screen of whatever the one you selected is. And then in general, you would just select the next pan size and change the min and max for that, whatever it is you're copying for the next step in the specification. It is important to have these in the correct order for the test because it's doing a bunch of math in order to determine whether the step is a pass or fail. And each step is cumulative, so the order by is very important in this particular scenario. So those are all the screens that you have to go to get set up. And once you have all your aggregates and specifications, you can start collecting the data. And under quality control, you would go to aggregate tests. I've got several in here. But if I wanted to create a new test, I click add new. And I enter the starting weight that we're going to measure, 15 pounds, and the date that we're running this, that the test was ran. And you select the plant, and I don't have a default plant. If you have a default plant, it would automatically start out with that selected. And the grade, and it would only show aggregates that are available in that plant. And then finally, you have the option of indicating that this is a quarry test. The quarry test is used in the reporting process, and I'll explain that a little bit more when I show you the report. But you can only have one quarry test per aggregate type. If you need to change the quarry test data, you would edit that test. So once there is one, you can't add another. So I've got 15 pounds here, and I'm looking for the first one where I have something in the sieve. So say 2 pounds. That's not quite. All right, so 1.5 pounds, and that's within the specification, so that row is passed. Four pounds, it's 66.3, so that's a passing. Let's see, where am I at? My total 5.5. Look at there. Okay, so now that's a passing value. Of course, in your real test, you would be weighing your results. And 1 pound here. Let's see. Let me say a half pound there, and then we have some in the pan. So in this test, we have a variance, and you can talk to our customer support if you need to change your scale variance. The default is 1% plus or minus. So if any of these values are plus or minus 1%, including the total weight, it would still be considered a passing test. And there's a chart down here, so you can see if something went way out of compliance, it would show up in there. And it'll show that where it's going out of compliance. And you can hover over these little circles to get information about that particular step. So now I've got it back into a passing range, and I'm going to save and close this. And back to my list. You can edit a test after you've created it. Like if you needed to change the total weight or the date that it was collected, you can change the entire test if some mistake was made. And if you save and close, it just goes back to the list. If you click save and edit, you'll be taken back to where you can enter the weights that you've collected. And if you don't need to make any changes to the starting information, you can just click on the scale and get back to the data entry page. You can also delete tests. And on this page, you can see if something is a pass or fail and if it's a quarry test or not. So if we needed to, if the quarry had entered, sent us new information, we could edit that quarry test with the updated information. So after you've got, your test, you might want to run a report. And the way this report is designed, it starts out with a year as the default date range. So a year back from today. Select your plant, the aggregate, just like you do when you're creating the tests. And it'll tell you that you have 5 available tests. If there's no quarry test here, you wouldn't be able to have a total number of tests that are greater than the available tests. With the quarry test in place, it will use that as part of the reporting process to reach the total number of tests that you require, which helps with the averages over a period of time. So if in a year you need to have 10 tests, but you've only got 5, it'll repeat the quarry test 5 times. Report, and you can see I've got my quarry test here is repeated enough times so that our total tests is 10. If I had one more actual in-house test, one of these quarry tests would drop off. And it lists the sieve sizes across the top, whatever ones you have set up in your system, and you'll get an average percentage down at the bottom. And you can export that to Excel, PDF, whatever it is you need for your system. And that is the basics of the aggregate gradations module. Brent, did you see any questions?
That is a lot. I haven't gotten any questions. Now would be a great time to send your questions. Okay, I have one question real quick, but before I ask that, I'm going to mention, if you notice across the top, you will notice that we can't use symbols currently in the naming of the sieves, correct, Tonya? So that's why you see the NO 16 for the number 16.
That is correct. I will mention, I think I mentioned to you the other day that I figured out a way around that, so we could change that in the future.
Okay. And I think this one may be more of an engineering question than what we are able. Says, what specifications have been used? Is it ASTM C136? The specification that Tonya used, I'm assuming she found on the internet, just used that. You will set up your own individual specifications in the configuration module. And another question we have is, can you calculate the finesse modulus for fine aggregates? I will be honest, I don't know what that is, and I'm going to assume that's a no. Is that accurate, Tonya?
Yeah, there's nothing in there about that value.
Finesse modulus. Okay. And another question, can you alternate or switch between metric and imperial weights?
You cannot, but if you...
Were the numbers in pounds or were they just a nominal amount when you were putting in a test?
It could be a nominal amount.
So theoretically, as long as your specifications are set up to be, well, they would be percentage. So yeah, your total weight is not in pounds or imperial, is not in pounds or metric. So
It's all,
whatever amount you use, that raw number is what you would have to add up to in the end. So if you put in 4,000 grams versus 2 pounds, you would just have to make sure that you put all of your weights, your retained weights in the same unit that you put your total weight in. Is that accurate, Tonya?
yes.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Wendell? No problem. All right. Is there any way to find the absorption, free moisture, and total moisture? This testing is merely for aggregate gradations, so I do not believe we currently have any area where we can test water content. That doesn't mean that that won't come in the future with an update, but currently what we've built tests aggregate gradation size and allows you to track the testing and see a graph of the individual tests. Okay, and while we wait to see if there are other questions, I'm going to have you go back to the spec configuration quick, Tonya, so that we can give some advice. So when you are setting these up, these were set up probably automated. You will notice that the order by, they go 1 through 32 on this page, or 1 through whatever they end on, 1 through 50 on this page. We would recommend that for each aggregate size that you are putting in a spec, that you would put in some amount of buffer between your specs so that if you have to change one, you don't have to go back in and change your order buys on all of them. Because there is no upper limit to how many order buys you can have. Well, there's probably an upper limit, but it's very large. So if you wanted to put 50 between each test, that would give you some flexibility to modify individual specifications without having to go back through the entire system and fix all the order buys. You even do not have to have them individually in order. They don't have to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could do 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, so that if you wanted to put one in between, you could modify it that way and make that easier to maintain as well. Similar to how we recommend maintaining all of your order by tables in the Concrete Vision system. Thank you to everyone who attended this webinar. This is not the last of these type of tests and functionality that we will be adding to Concrete Vision. This was our first in-depth specification test that we added to the system.